Snoop Dogg boarded a private jet for a dream getaway, but what happened midair changed everything. You won't believe the shocking events that unfolded on this flight. Stay tuned until the end to uncover the full story. And don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe. Your support makes all the difference. Snoop Dogg leaned back in his plush leather seat, his signature sunglasses resting comfortably on his nose as he scrolled through his playlist. This was the moment he had been waiting for, a long overdue break from the chaos of touring, recording, and non-stop commitments. Destination? The breathtaking beaches of the Maldives. The private jet was top-tier luxury, ambient lighting, impeccable service, and a smooth ride that felt more like a five-star hotel in the sky. A flight attendant approached with a glass of freshly pressed juice. "Here you go, Mr. Broadus," she said with a warm smile, addressing him by his real name. "Let us know if you need anything." Snoop accepted the drink with a grin, raising it in a playful toast. "Y'all outdid yourselves with this setup." As the plane taxied down the runway, Snoop glanced at the other passengers, business elites, high-end travelers, all minding their own business. No wild fan energy. Perfect. Once in the air, he settled in, letting the hum of the engines and gentle vibrations inspire him. He grabbed his tablet, jotting down ideas for a new track, letting creativity flow as the jet soared over the ocean. Hours passed. The cabin lights dimmed as night settled in. Snoop reclined his seat, ready to drift off into a light doze when the intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've successfully left U.S. airspace and are cruising at 35,000 feet. The weather is clear, and we're on schedule to arrive in the Maldives in under 8 hours. Thank you for flying with us." Passengers murmured in acknowledgement, some peering out at the vast, moonlit ocean below. Snoop stretched slightly, appreciating the smooth ride. Everything was going perfectly. Until the captain stepped out of the cockpit. Tall, well-groomed, and exuding authority, the captain moved through the aisle, greeting passengers. A standard gesture on a high-end flight. But then, he stopped at Snoop's row. For a split second, his expression flickered, eyes lingering just a little too long, a faint crease forming between his brows. Snoop slid off his sunglasses and nodded politely. "Enjoying the flight, sir?" the captain asked, his voice measured but carrying an undertone Snoop couldn't quite place. "Sure am," Snoop replied casually. "Y'all run a tight ship, much appreciated." But the captain didn't move on. Instead, his expression hardened, arms crossing over his chest. "Well," he said, tone sharpening, "we aim to ensure that everyone here belongs. May I ask who you are and why you're on this flight?" Snoop blinked. Was this dude serious? "I'm Snoop Dogg," he said, gesturing toward himself. "Booked the flight fair and square. Everything's in order, my man." The captain's frown deepened. "I see. But you'll forgive me if I don't just take your word for it." The air in the cabin shifted. Passengers nearby started paying attention. Snoop stayed calm, but his jaw tightened slightly. He had dealt with all kinds of doubters before, but this was different. "Look," he said evenly. "You got the paperwork, right? Check it. Everything's legit. No need to make a thing out of this." But the captain didn't back down. Instead, he cast a glance around the cabin, as if waiting for someone to agree with him. Then, with a muttered, "We'll see about that," he turned on his heel and disappeared back into the cockpit. Snoop sighed, sinking back into his seat. Something about that whole exchange felt off. And he had a feeling this flight was about to take a turn no one saw coming. What was supposed to be a peaceful getaway turned into something far more unsettling. Stay tuned to find out how it all unfolded, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Snoop Dogg took a deep breath, telling himself not to let the strange encounter with the captain ruin his trip. He had done nothing wrong. This was meant to be a vacation, not a confrontation. The other passengers settled back into their routines, though some cast curious glances in his direction. Sliding his sunglasses back on, Snoop leaned back and closed his eyes, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. But deep down, a nagging voice told him this was only the beginning. The cabin was quiet, the hum of the engines, dimmed lights, passengers lost in movies or conversation. Snoop scrolled through his phone, replaying beats, distracting himself. Then, the intercom crackled. "Mr. Broaddus, please remain seated. I will be speaking with you shortly." The captain's voice was different this time, curt, commanding. Heads turned. The tension in the air sharpened. Snoop sat up, his brow furrowing. This wasn't just unusual, it felt targeted. Passengers murmured, their eyes darting between him and the cockpit. Moments later, the captain reemerged, flanked by two nervous flight attendants. His posture was rigid, his expression cold. He walked straight to Snoop's seat. "Mr. Broaddus," the captain said sharply, "I have some questions about your presence on this flight." Snoop exhaled slowly, keeping his composure. "Man, I already told you, I booked this flight fair and square. Check with the charter company. Everything's legit." The captain's lips curled into a smirk. "You expect me to believe that? A man like you, flying first class on a private jet?" The words hung in the air. Snoop blinked, momentarily stunned by the audacity. "A man like me?" His voice was calm, but laced with disbelief. "What's that supposed to mean?" The captain leaned in slightly, his eyes full of unspoken accusations. "You know exactly what I mean," he snapped. "You don't belong here. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not buying it." The cabin went silent. Passengers froze. Snoop shook his head slowly. "I don't know what your problem is, but I got receipts, paperwork, whatever you need. Just do your job and let me enjoy my flight." But the captain wasn't backing down. His stance grew more aggressive, arms crossed over his chest. "I don't care what paperwork you claim to have. People like you, troublemakers, criminals, you all think you can buy your way into places you don't belong. Not on my watch." The words landed like a slap. Snoop clenched his fists, his patience wearing thin. He had dealt with prejudice before, but never this blatantly, never in such a confined space, in front of an audience. "You don't know me, man," he said, voice steady but firm. "I'm here on my own dime, minding my own business. You're the one making this a thing." The captain leaned in even closer, eyes locked onto Snoop's. "I know enough. You're nothing but a thug with money. And money doesn't buy respect, not from me." The tension became suffocating. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others openly stared. A flight attendant, visibly shaken, stepped forward hesitantly. "Captain, maybe we should." "Stay out of this," the captain barked, shutting her down instantly. Snoop exhaled, standing up slowly. Even at a relaxed posture, he towered over the captain. "I'm done talking," he said. "If you got a problem, take it up with the charter company. I'm not here for your drama." But the captain wasn't finished. He jabbed a finger into Snoop's chest. "You think you can intimidate me? You're just another punk who thinks he's above the rules." That was it. The floodgates opened. The captain launched into a tirade, hurling insult after insult, gangster, drug dealer, scum. Each word hit like a blow, echoing through the silent cabin. Snoop didn't move. Didn't react. He refused to give the man the satisfaction. Finally, the captain straightened up, his face smug. "I'll deal with this my way," he said coldly before turning on his heel and marching back to the cockpit. Snoop sank back into his seat, his hands trembling, not with fear, but with restrained anger. Around him, passengers whispered. Some looked shocked. Others avoided his gaze, pretending they hadn't just witnessed the whole thing. Snoop turned to the window, staring out at the endless dark sky. This trip was supposed to be an escape. A moment of peace. But now, he was trapped in a situation that felt like something out of a nightmare. And something told him, It was only going to get worse. Snoop Dogg's flight took a dark turn and ended in the unthinkable. What started as a luxurious trip became something far more sinister. You won't believe where this flight led him. Stay tuned to uncover the full story, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. The plane continued its smooth journey, but for Snoop, the real turbulence had already begun. The captain's words lingered in the air, poisoning the atmosphere, yet Snoop stayed silent, trying to hold his composure. He thought about the other passengers, the crew, even the pilot himself. How many times had something like this happened before? How many people had been treated this way but never had the platform to speak out? Then, the intercom blared again. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an unscheduled landing at the nearest airstrip due to a safety concern. A ripple of confusion spread through the cabin. Passengers exchanged nervous glances, murmuring among themselves. But Snoop knew exactly what this was. It wasn't about safety. It was about him. Moments later, the captain stormed down the aisle, his expression even colder than before. He stopped directly in front of Snoop's seat, his posture rigid, his tone sharp. "You," he barked, jabbing a finger at Snoop. "Get your things. You're getting off this plane." Snoop remained seated, his voice calm despite the fury rising inside him. "Man, I ain't going anywhere. I paid for this flight just like everybody else." The captain's sneer deepened. "I said get up. Now. Or I'll make you." The tension in the cabin was unbearable. Some passengers looked like they wanted to say something, but fear kept them silent. When Snoop didn't move, the captain grabbed him by the arm and yanked him up, shoving him roughly toward the aisle. "You're a danger to this flight. I'm not taking any chances." The violence caught Snoop off guard, but he quickly steadied himself. "Danger?" He glared at the captain. "The only danger here is you." The captain's response was swift and brutal. He shoved Snoop again, harder this time, sending him stumbling into the aisle. Gasps filled the cabin. But no one moved. Snoop could see the fear in their eyes. They didn't want to be next. Snoop straightened, his side aching from the impact. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay composed. "I'm not gonna fight you," he said, his voice steady. "But you're gonna regret this." The captain smirked, his arrogance in full display. "We'll see about that." The plane began its descent. The cabin tilted slightly as it approached the unknown landing site. Snoop stood firm, refusing to let the captain see him shaken. When the plane finally landed, the door was thrown open, and humid air from the jungle-like landscape outside poured in. The captain grabbed Snoop's belongings and tossed them onto the tarmac without a word. "Out," he barked. Snoop stood at the doorway, looking out at the unfamiliar surroundings, dense greenery, an isolated airstrip, and nothing else. He turned back to the captain, his voice low and unwavering. "You think this is over?" The captain smirked and shoved him toward the door. "Get out before I call the authorities." With no choice, Snoop stepped onto the tarmac. The plane door slammed shut behind him. Moments later, the engines roared and the jet took off, disappearing into the sky, leaving him stranded. Alone. Nowhere to go. Snoop clutched his bag, his mind reeling. The humiliation. The anger. The sheer disbelief of what had just happened. For the first time in years, he felt truly powerless. The airstrip was deserted, except for a small, weathered shed in the distance. Beyond that, nothing but thick jungle and the eerie sounds of unseen wildlife. He started walking, his footsteps crunching against the gravel. The shed was empty, its door barely hanging on its hinges. He was completely alone. Hours passed. The oppressive heat drained his energy. His muscles ached from the altercation. His clothes clung to him, damp with sweat. He thought about his family, his fans, the life he had built. How had it come to this? As night fell, the jungle came alive. Distant howls, rustling leaves, the unseen eyes of creatures lurking in the dark. Snoop found a clearing and sat against a tree, staring up at the sky. The stars were barely visible through the thick canopy. He was exhausted, bruised, alone. But he refused to give in to despair. He didn't know how, but he was going to get out of this. And when he did, the world was going to know what happened. And that, Captain? He was going to pay. The weight of the situation pressed down on Snoop. Alone. No way to contact anyone. No idea where he was. The jungle surrounded him, thick and unyielding, and the night was closing in. His body ached from the captain's assault, and exhaustion gnawed at him. But he refused to give up. He stumbled through the dense foliage, each step heavy with pain. Then, hope. A faint light flickered in the distance. Ignoring the sharp pain in his legs, he pushed forward. The closer he got, the brighter the glow became, revealing a small cluster of huts. The air was alive with music, laughter, and the rhythmic beat of drums. Snoop hesitated. Would they see him as a threat? With no other option, he stepped into the clearing, hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. The music stopped. All eyes turned to him. For a moment, silence. Then, "Yo, is that Snoop Dogg?" A young man near the edge of the group gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. The tension shattered. Excited murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some grabbed their phones, snapping pictures and recording videos. Others just stared, their expressions a mix of awe and concern. A tall, muscular man stepped forward, his smile friendly but curious. "You're Snoop Dogg? Man, what are you doing here? You look like you've been through hell." Snoop let out a tired chuckle, lowering his hands. "Yeah, something like that. Got thrown out of a plane by a racist pilot. Now I'm just trying to get home." The villagers' expressions darkened with outrage. The tall man clapped a reassuring hand on Snoop's shoulder. "You're safe now, brother. We got you." They led him into one of the larger huts, where women immediately began tending to his injuries. They worked with gentle efficiency, cleaning his cuts, offering him food and water. Word spread quickly. More villagers arrived, bringing small gifts, tokens of respect and admiration. Snoop was overwhelmed by their kindness. Among them was the tall man, who introduced himself as Jamal. He sat with Snoop, along with a group of village elders, listening intently as Snoop recounted the events of the flight. Jamal's jaw clenched. "That pilot's gotta pay for what he did," he said firmly. "But first, we're getting you home." Over the next few days, the villagers went above and beyond to help Snoop. They contacted local authorities, arranged transportation, even pooled their resources to cover the cost of his flight back to the U.S. But before he left, they had one last surprise. A celebration in his honor. The clearing transformed into a lively festival, music, dancing, and an endless spread of food. Though still recovering, Snoop joined in, laughing and sharing stories with his newfound family. As he boarded the plane they had arranged for him, Jamal and the others gathered to see him off. Snoop turned to them, his voice thick with gratitude. "Y'all didn't have to do all this. I'll never forget what you did for me. Thank you." Jamal grinned, clapping him on the back. "Just remember, you got family here now. Anytime you need us, we got your back." The flight home was uneventful. A stark contrast to the nightmare that had brought him to the jungle. As Snoop stared out the window, watching the clouds roll by, a new sense of purpose settled in. He wasn't going to let this go. The world needed to know what happened. And that, Captain? He was going to face justice. When the plane landed, relief mixed with determination. Snoop stepped onto U.S. soil, not just as a returning traveler, but as a man on a mission. A small crowd had gathered near the airport. fans who had caught wind of his sudden disappearance through social media. As soon as they saw him, cheers erupted. Some held signs reading "Welcome home, Snoop." Others raised their phones, capturing the moment. "Good to be back," he muttered under his breath, forcing a smile as he waved to the crowd. Waiting just outside the terminal was his manager, Kevin. His face was etched with a mix of worry and anger. As soon as Snoop approached, Kevin wasted no time. "What the hell happened, man?" And just like that, the battle had begun. As soon as Snoop stepped off the plane, his manager, Kevin, pulled him into a tight hug. "Man, you good?" Kevin asked, stepping back to look him over. "We heard some crazy stuff. What happened out there?" Snoop sighed, running a hand over his face. "Long story, Kev. That pilot? Straight up racist. Threw me off the damn plane in the middle of nowhere. If it wasn't for some real ones, I'd still be stuck." Kevin's jaw tightened, fists clenching. "You serious? This ain't just bad, this is criminal. We gotta make moves, Snoop. We can't let this slide." "Already on it," Snoop said, his voice resolute. "Get the legal team ready. I'm taking this public." The ride home was quiet, except for the constant beeping of Kevin's phone as he coordinated with lawyers, PR reps, and media contacts. Snoop stared out the window, replaying the flight over and over in his mind, every insult, every shove, every moment of humiliation. It all fueled his determination. Once home, he went straight to his office. Kevin set up a camera, and within minutes, Snoop was live on all his social media platforms. Millions of followers flooded the stream, spamming the chat with messages of concern and support. Snoop adjusted the mic, took a deep breath, and started. "Yo, what's up everybody? It's your boy Snoop. I know y'all been wondering where I've been the past few days, and I gotta tell you, it ain't a story I ever thought I'd have to share. But y'all need to hear this." He laid it all out. The captain's hostility. The violent confrontation. Being abandoned in the jungle. And the kindness of the locals who saved him. His voice stayed steady, but the raw emotion was undeniable. By the time he finished, the chat was on fire. "We ain't taking this anymore," Snoop said, leaning into the camera. "That man thought he could get away with this 'cause of what I look like. Nah, not today. We fighting back. And we making sure this don't happen to nobody else." The response was instant. His video went viral, trending across every major platform. Celebrities, activists, and fans rallied behind him. Hashtag Justice for Snoop dominated social media, sparking a nationwide conversation about racial discrimination in air travel. Meanwhile, Kevin worked around the clock. A lawsuit was filed against the pilot and the airline within 48 hours. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, the case was all over national TV. "This isn't just about Snoop Dogg," one reporter said. "This is about systemic issues that have been ignored for too long." The pressure mounted. The airline scrambled to issue statements distancing themselves from the pilot. But words weren't enough. The public wanted accountability. Snoop stayed focused. This wasn't just about him. This was about making sure no one else had to face what he did. And as he prepared for the legal battle ahead, he knew millions of voices stood behind him, demanding justice. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, activists, and onlookers filled every seat. Cameras lined the entrance, capturing every moment as Snoop Dogg arrived, flanked by his legal team. His expression was calm but determined. Inside, the tension was thick. Captain Richard Wallace, the pilot, sat stiffly at the defendant's table, his face pale but defiant. His legal team whispered among themselves, exchanging nervous glances toward the jury. Across from them, Snoop's team was the picture of confidence. Leading the charge was a powerhouse civil rights attorney, a sharp, commanding woman who had taken the case with as much fire as her client. The trial began with opening statements. Wallace's defense tried to paint him as a professional acting out of concern for passenger safety. They claimed Snoop's behavior was suspicious, but their argument crumbled under scrutiny. Snoop's lawyer took the floor, dismantling their claims with surgical precision. "This is not a case about safety," she declared. "This is a case about prejudice. About a man who abused his power to humiliate and endanger a passenger simply because of the color of his skin." The prosecution brought forth damning evidence. Witnesses testified. Passengers recounted how the captain singled out Snoop before speaking to anyone else. "He didn't even give the man a chance," one businessman stated. "It was clear from the start he had made up his mind about Mr. Broaddus." The biggest turning point came when flight attendants were called to the stand. Initially hesitant, they finally broke their silence. One woman, her voice shaking, admitted, "I knew it was wrong. I saw the captain shove him. I saw him leave him on the tarmac. But he was the captain. I was scared." The defense grew desperate, resorting to cheap tactics, bringing up old controversies, questioning Snoop's character. But it backfired. Snoop's lawyer shut it down with one statement: "Mr. Broaddus is not on trial here. What is on trial is the blatant abuse of authority and the racism that fueled it." Then, the final blow. Security footage from the airport. The entire courtroom watched in silence as the video played. The captain throwing Snoop's belongings onto the tarmac. The shove. The plane taking off, leaving him stranded. The jury didn't need long. Less than 3 hours later, the verdict was in. Guilty. Captain Wallace was convicted of multiple charges, including assault and unlawful endangerment. The courtroom erupted. The judge delivered the sentence, a permanent revocation of Wallace's pilot license and a significant prison term. Outside, supporters cheered as Snoop emerged, raising a hand in gratitude. Reporters clamored for statements. Snoop kept it brief. "This ain't just about me," he said. "This is about all of us. Justice was served today. And we're gonna keep fighting till it's served for everybody." The moment went viral, cementing Snoop not just as a music icon, but as a symbol of resilience and justice. Weeks later, Snoop was finally back where he was supposed to be. A private jet soared smoothly at 35,000 feet. No tension. No hostility. Just peace. Snoop leaned back, champagne in hand, gazing out at the endless blue sky. His team sat nearby, celebrating the victory. "Cheers to the real ones," Snoop said, raising his glass. "Y'all had my back through all this. Couldn't have done it without you." Kevin smirked. "Nah, man. This was all you. We just made sure the world was watching." The group laughed, clinking glasses. As the jet neared its destination, the pilot, a middle-aged black woman, approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Broaddus, it's an honor to have you on board. Let us know if there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable." Snoop shook her hand. "Appreciate you, Captain. Y'all already done more than enough." Outside the window, the Maldives came into view. Crystal clear waters. White sand beaches. Finally, he had made it. This was the trip he had dreamed of. And now, he could enjoy it knowing he had turned a moment of humiliation into something powerful. As he stepped onto the sand, the weight of the past weeks finally lifted. Justice had been served. And the world would never forget.